I would like to introduce our partner from the Ministry of Foreign Trade and Economic Relations, Mr. Mirza Houj, Assistant Minister. He's been working in the tourism sector for many years. And he will introduce our next panelist, Alessandra Priante, a friend and colleague for many years, who's running the Europe division at the UNWTO. And this is the second session after this one. But before we go to UNWTO and Mirza, I'd like to begin by looking at what is happening in the world. What type of opportunities we have, what are the challenges that are facing tourism development. And for this, we went to our friends at Oxford Economics and their affiliate Tourism Economics. And we asked my friend and colleague, David Goodger, for some research and to share with us insights. Now, David has been working with 300 cities. He's been working with the World Travel and Tourism Council. Over 100 countries benefit from the research that he's spearheading. He's really one of the world's authorities on tourism modeling, economic impacts, and forecasting into the future. And I had a simple question to David. What's happening in the world, and when will things come back to normal? David?
Okay, thank you for the introduction there, Ibrahim. Let me just bring my slides up to talk through. And so, yes, hopefully I can help provide an answer to that question of what is happening in the world. And within this session, just like to talk through, what we're seeing in Oxford Economics, within tourism economics, within our forecasting for what's happening in terms of the, recovery in travel and tourism sector globally within Europe, and specifically, what does this mean for Bosnia and Herzegovina? Well, starting off with a very big picture, just sharing some data from one of our data partners, STR, is that we can see that throughout 2020, we did see some considerable recovery, some very promising growth, some pickups in activity, certainly at the hotel level, across a whole range of different destinations, getting back to somewhat approaching normal, if not quite normal, throughout some of the summer months. But then, sadly, we have seen, new waves of the virus, new variants of the virus, new risks coming through. And particularly in Europe, we can see, if I'm looking at this grey line on the chart here, you can see that activity has started falling back. The lockdowns are taking their toll, and we are back to some very weak levels of activity moving into 2021, when we were, getting quite hopeful during the summer that things were getting back to normal. But this has made us think of this gentleman here, someone who has not really been on our radar until the last year. So this is a gentleman called Thomas Fuller, who was an English churchman and historian in the 17th century. And he has this famous quote that we do like. It says, "The darkest hour of the night comes just before dawn." And this is where we believe that we are before the dawn, as the vaccinations are coming through, and there is definitely hope. There is going to be that rebound in travel, and there is that demand that Bosnia-Herzegovina can grasp hold of. So a lot of parallels with him, but he did pen this within a travelogue of the Holy Land, and unfortunately he died age 53 of an epidemic infectious disease. So some unfortunate parallels with today there as well, that we hoping not to be replicating too close to home. So as we're actually looking at what we're expecting to see with this new dawn, with this recovery, this new growth starting in 2021, we've identified 5 key themes that I'd just like to touch on for general global growth, European growth, and specifically for Bosnia and Herzegovina. So firstly, we are seeing new vaccines now. This will motivate the return to growth in a way that we didn't see in 2020. In 2020, it was just the measures of isolating, distancing, testing in some places that was allowing something of a return to normal or getting close to normal. Now we're seeing the vaccines coming in that will really drive that recovery in 2021 and later on. So as a quick overview of what we're seeing within our outlook as we're trying to compile forecasts for all of the different destinations, countries, cities we work with. So yes, we are seeing new infections, we're seeing some elevated infection rates, but we are seeing the vaccine rollout. This is continuing through this first quarter and is really going to have an impact then on the policies that we're seeing. There's going to be some lockdown measures, some travel restrictions in place for parts of this year, but this will ease and will be less stringent than we saw last year. And slowly, gradually, we will see those borders beginning to open. And then we will get back to something that is dictated by more normal activity and more normal economic drivers. We do see in normal times that travel demand is very strongly linked to economic demand. And 2020, we have seen deep recession, sharp recession, over 4% fall in global GDP, very large drop. But we do then expect to see a rapid economic recovery in 2021 and going beyond that, regaining most of that ground, some of the fastest growth almost in my lifetime, as we see this pent-up demand being realized, and we will see that travel demand coming back with that economic growth over time. And this pent-up demand is clear across a number of surveys. Just flagging up some numbers here that we've seen in the survey that the European Travel Commission has carried out on a monthly basis. And in their latest numbers, it still shows very high propensity to travel. Over 50% of respondents saying they are likely or very likely to travel within Europe, and much fewer saying they're unlikely to travel. And as we go through the year, we expect those numbers to continue to hold up and to even grow. And that is one of the striking things, that demand has stayed the same over the past few months, despite everything we're going through. So we do expect to see that demand there once people are able to travel. And then once you can start reaching out to those markets, there is that demand there. But how we get there, there are a lot of challenges that we're seeing in the vaccine distribution process that will certainly help to define what the specifics of that profile look like. So starting with what we've seen to date, is looking at hopefully the latest data, or maybe out by a couple of days, but looking at how many vaccinations have been given per capita across different countries. See, there has been a very mixed start to this. There's some standout success stories, obviously, but overall across the majority of markets, looking down that list, the majority of European markets, which are important for travel to Bosnia-Herzegovina, it has been a slow start. Very small proportions of the population have actually received that vaccine. And we think that there will be some continued bumps on the road, partly due to that distribution within the country, the distribution across countries, as well as the production of the vaccine. And this is just showing some of the analysis that my colleagues in some of our macroeconomic teams have done, looking at the possible scale of vaccinations by the end of this first quarter. This has been looking at the number of orders for the different types of approved vaccinations that have been put in by country. It's looking at the likely scale of production and distribution for them. And we can see, so looking on the left across a group of largely developed markets, you can see that orders have been put in for very large proportions of the population, and it's reasonable to expect that there are deliveries of very high quantities of that in this first quarter of the year. And then assuming that we can actually get that actually into the arms of people within the population, taking some more cautious estimates of that, saying about 2/3 of the upper estimate, we can still see across a large proportion of these developed markets that you're covering most of the vulnerable population, around 30%. So some very encouraging statistics there when we look at what's happening with vaccines. Trouble is, when we look then over on the right of this chart, we can see across some more developing markets, there just aren't the same number of orders that have been put in. It's not quite the same amount of distribution there, and there will be the further challenges. So we do have to wait some time into 2021 until we can expect to see significant amounts of immunity, allowing some significant return to actual travel trends. So overall, we are expecting globally, in terms of our baseline, the blue line here, we're expecting to see a rapid rebound from the extreme lows we saw last year, roughly a doubling of international travel activity relative to last year, but that's still around 40% lower than the previous peak in 2019, and still not until 2024 until we are actually regaining those previous peak levels. And there is some significant uncertainty around this. There's clearly an upside. Things could go a lot better. We could see much more rapid rollout, could see surprises on the upside, reaching those upper levels of distribution, rebounding travel confidence even higher than we're expecting with that pent-up demand. And we could see getting back to those previous peaks even earlier. But still, we do need to acknowledge some of the downside risks associated with the new variants and possible less effectiveness of some of the vaccines and other therapeutic measures. And looking at this around the world, we do expect a similar pattern for pretty much every country and region in terms of the international travel. We do expect that recovery by 2024, for the vast majority of regions and also for the vast majority of countries. There will be some differences there. You can see some differences evident in the data for 2020 and in the recovery path. This is due to differences in some of the policies that have been put in place in terms of different lockdown measures, different testing regimes. Recovery will also be affected by how vaccines get rolled out, the different markets involved in travel, the different preferences for routes, whether it's short haul, long haul, reliance on business and leisure travel, and also that economic return. But one thing to note, specific within Europe, there was actually the lowest fall in 2020 across all of the regions. Still, much larger fall than we would ever like to see, but there was that willingness to open borders, that willingness to open travel, and that real demand from the people in Europe to travel within the region. And we think that will help to drive the region to hit that 2024 growth, even if the economy is maybe not as dynamic as some of the other regions with emerging markets and younger populations. Now, there will still be that relatively rapid recovery in Europe. Recession impacts that economic demand will be important as we're looking at this travel recovery, particularly when we're looking at some of the long haul travel. And so touching on that, where we think the economy will be, there will unfortunately be some lingering economic scarring from the pandemic, from the recession. Looking at our baseline outlook for global GDP, you can see that the rebound occurred so in the second half of 2020. And we're seeing somewhat modest growth, but still relatively rapid recovery, regaining the lost levels, getting back to 2019 levels, but may not quite getting back to the pre-pandemic trend growth rates. And actually, this recovery path going into the medium to long term, we do expect it to be similar to the recovery coming out of the global financial crisis. So there will still be that longer run economic scarring. That's that impact on people's incomes, which will then affect some of the willingness to travel. And we'll see some people looking for some relatively lower cost options. So looking closer to home, looking more for value than there has been in the past. And coupled with all of the other mega trends we've seen in travel, the need for sustainability, we think that will also feed into some of the shorter haul travel. And it's great to hear some of the things that Ibrahim was talking about in terms of some of the sustainable development, which will really help to Bosnia-Herzegovina to take advantage of some of this growth in this recovery period. We do also, though, need to be aware on the economic side, there are some significant risks, more risks around it than we'd like to see. There are on the downside, could see that even worse second waves, much delayed recoveries, continued measures could push into a financial crisis. There's a lot of things that could potentially be gloomy about, but key takeaway from this is that now compared to where we were throughout much of 2020 is we do have that balance to these risks. We do have that upside. We could still potentially see a rapid upturn, that rapid response to these new vaccines that are coming out, to the new measures, and we could get back to closer to those pre-pandemic levels of economic activity and more dynamic economy, more dynamic travel demand. One risk to call out would be policy mistakes. There has been a lot of support from governments to travel and tourism sector. This remains key. Essentially the call is do not pull the life support out from the sector just yet. There is still a long way to go. Obviously this policy support needs to be eased off over time, but it's something that we are looking for and calling on for governments. Keep supporting the sector. It is a crucial sector. It does continue to drive large quantities of economic activity, supports large amounts of employment across economies worldwide, and that support is going to remain essential for continuing growth. The fourth key theme we're looking at in terms of recovery in 2021 and beyond, and this one is I think very important for Bosnia-Herzegovina, is this that, and I've already touched on this a little, is that people will be opting for closer to home destinations. People will be looking to travel more domestically, be looking to travel more within short haul, and including in this, there is that increased focus on more sustainable travel, whether it's fewer trips per year, whether it's fewer flights per year. People are starting to focus more on the carbon footprint of their travel, aware of what that involves, be looking for more of regional destinations, and certainly they'll also in the first instance be looking for outside activities, nature-based travel, things that Bosnia-Herzegovina is well placed to sell into. These trends are then clearly supported in the numbers. Again, looking back at the European Travel Commission surveys, can see that the favoured destinations are within the region. In the latest wave of their survey, 36% of travellers saying their next destination will be within their country. 40% on top of that saying it will be within Europe. It's still a small proportion that are looking to travel beyond the region. People will be favouring that short haul destinations, the places that are have that, even if they're not a familiar destination, they have a familiar feel, a familiar culture overall, that sense of safety, as well as that affordability and that sustainable aspect to it. Overall, we are expecting in our forecast, we do see domestic travel coming back ahead of international travel, see domestic regaining 2019 levels by 2022 rather than the 2024 for international. And similarly, the short haul within that international, we do expect to see coming back sooner, around 2023, closer to the domestic travel patterns. And overall, if we look at the share of travel that's domestic and the share of travel that's inter-regional in Europe, over the past 10 years to 2019, we have seen a declining share of that short haul travel. People have been looking beyond the region, both in terms of source markets and in terms of destinations. Europeans have been traveling increasingly longer haul, European destinations increasingly selling to a lot of longer haul markets. China taking a much larger proportion of travel activity. This is true across a whole range of destinations. Looking at the data for Bosnia-Herzegovina, it's quite clear there as well, that increase in demand from China, other Asian markets, including Korea, some of the Middle Eastern markets coming in as well. And these markets will continue to be important in time over the long haul, and the fact that they're attracted is shows that there are key attractions and really attractive destinations to draw them in. But certainly in the medium term, over the next 5 years, we do see an elevated share, something of a break in that trend, as people will be looking for those more short haul destinations, that more local travel to take place. It will account for, European destinations will account for a higher proportion of travel by Europeans themselves. And final theme, just want to touch on as we're looking for ahead for this recovery, is that leisure travel is going to lead the way. Business travel will remain subdued. Looking back over history, we can see that that has been the case as well. Certainly looking after 9/11, global financial crisis, 9/11 also coinciding with economic downturn. These are times when we have seen travel fall, certainly international travel, and business travel fell by more than leisure, took longer to recover, around 2 to 3 years recovery for those previous examples. Somewhat unfair comparison in terms of the scale this time, but in terms of timing, again, we do expect that longer recovery from business travel, getting back to previous peaks after the leisure travel. It's possibly clearer on this chart here. We've broken travel in Europe, travel to European destinations in terms of spending down into 4 segments. You can see that the slowest segment to recover will be the international business travel, not until 2025, actually beyond the time frame on here. International leisure coming faster, and then on the domestic side, as mentioned, domestic travel coming back sooner, and it's domestic leisure. It's really going to be driving that. And this is true across Europe as a whole, where domestic leisure is very important. So for Europe as a whole, domestic leisure accounts for over half of travel spending. So that's going to be key for a lot of destinations. Actually, we look at then our forecast numbers for Bosnia-Herzegovina. We see a similar pattern in terms of the different pace of recovery across the different segments. But the thing that really stands out when we're looking at these numbers is the importance of that international leisure demand, the domestic market being smaller, for somewhat obvious reasons due to the different geographic features of the country. But it's the international leisure that will be really crucial in driving that recovery. The comparisons may not be obvious between the charts, but there is a notable large fall that we've seen in the data in the trends for 2020 for the international leisure. So things, as I'm sure you're aware, were quite tough last year, but we still see that segment recovering relatively rapidly in comparison with the rest of Europe. A lot of those features that have been mentioned really driving that mix of markets will be behind that as well. There's a solid base of the large local markets as well, and then coming once we get later into this period, as we're starting to see that longer haul coming back, some of that gains that were evident in the prior years will become evident, and we do expect to see that international leisure travel really driving that recovery for Bosnia-Herzegovina, getting back to prior levels by 2024. So at that point, hopefully I've helped to answer the broad question of what is happening in the world, and hopefully set the stage for some of the detailed discussion that can take place.
Thank you, David, for quite valuable information. And you spoke about 2 regions and the theme of drawing tourism from essentially the neighborhood. After domestic tourism, people are going to travel in the neighborhood. You spoke about the importance of the European market, about 40%. You spoke about that segment is ready to travel beyond their border, but in the neighborhood. Mm-hmm. And you spoke about the importance of the Middle Eastern market. What's interesting is that all of what you said is part of the recovery plan. So I'm glad to see that the direction of the tactical recovery plan that's looking at Rebound in the coming 12 to 18 months is in sync with the latest research. And I have to thank you for providing us lots of the data already in the past few months. So it's been quite important that the work that the tourism board and our partners have been doing is grounded in real research and data. So I want to thank you for that. Now, in the interest of time, I only have one question that is possible within the agenda. And that's looking at the German market. Germany, until recently, was the #1 market. After China, now it's #2, but it's still the highest spender. It's right next to us. So strategically speaking, it's the most important global market. And they went into lockdown. One of the leading travel publications a couple of weeks ago led with a headline saying, nobody's taking the Germans, they have nowhere to go, but there is a real demand to travel. And the question is, are we going to see opening of borders? Are we going to see the Germans traveling abroad? And how much of an opportunity is this for Bosnia and Herzegovina, you think? Because that's a key market, it's a close market, and it's a heavily spending market.
Yes, yes, there will be a return. And I think that is, key to all of our forecasts is that, and it's true across all markets, people want to travel. There is a need for travel, for leisure, for business. It's great that we can all sit here and in our own homes and connect digitally, but we all know there is a real value in meeting people. We are social creatures. We want to meet people. The benefits of some of these meetings go beyond just, talking to each other directly in this way. It's all the meetings over coffee, the discussions that we have. Business travel will clearly return in that way. And leisure travel will absolutely return. People want to go places. People want to, escape their local environment. They want to see places. They want to have those experiences. And absolutely, we expect travel to return globally. Certainly, specifically from German market, it will recover. There is absolutely that opportunity there. The key question then is on timing. By 2022, yes, we do expect, the vaccinations will have reached that critical mass that we think there will be, borders will be able to open, people will be able to, be really starting to get back to normal. There may need to be some additional, testing measures still in place. 2021, this is the road to that step. There will be some of those measures in place, but our hope, our central forecast is that by the time we're getting into the key summer months, you've already talked on the seasonality, by the time we're getting into those months, we will be starting to see those measures being lifted again. So yes, 2021 is the start, but yes, beyond that, it will recover.
Do you have a view, when we're speaking still about the German market, because I know you do the city forecast, and you have about 300 cities under your radar screen. Again, I spoke earlier in my presentation that no longer are we looking at wholesale German market or the Finnish market. We're looking at more specific psychographics. But even then, if you want to zero in a certain geography, you might still look at key producing cities. Does your research indicate what are the hottest cities, for example, in Europe for travel?
Yes, to some extent. You're putting me on the spot there, Ibrahim. With don't have all of the numbers quite to my fingertips. But yes, it does largely follow. I think what you would expect. So the largest, wealthiest markets are the hottest travel markets essentially, and factor in that the requirements for travel, the need to travel, that pent up travel almost coming from Northern European cities. That is key opportunities. So yes, I think the German markets, the German cities, great opportunities.
Thank you. I must say, of course, that our recovery plan, when I say our, that means Bosnia and Herzegovina. I already feel like one of the citizens of Bosnia and Herzegovina. Everyone's been so hospitable, and since I moved here, I feel like I've been here forever. So that's the definition of the we and the our. But I want to thank you, David, for everything you've done to inform our work in the past few months. And I want to thank you for your presentation today. Regards to your team, to Adam in Philadelphia, who's been working with us as well, and the entire organization of Tourism Economics and Oxford Economics. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Have a great day.